recording, share my screen, and then start the webinar. Okay, hello everybody. We're gonna give it a few more seconds to let everybody hop in through the system. Sorry, we're a couple moments late, but we're gonna go ahead and get started in about 30 seconds. So thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. It looks like the system is still letting people in, but we're just going to start with a couple logistical things. So I think it's okay to give it a go. I first want to say welcome everybody to today's webinar on how to build resilience and adapt to future conditions through integrated planning for flood resilience in particular. My name is Jenna Moran, and I am the co-director and portfolio manager for the AICP Flood Science Center. I am going to be your moderator today, and I wanted to just go over a few admin items before we begin. As you can see here on the screen, we are going to provide a recording and a copy of the video and slide deck after the webinar. That should be available in about a week, so keep your eyes peeled for those. Right now, we have all lines muted. And given the size of this webinar, we're going to stay on mute. So to engage, we are going to use the question and answer feature. You'll see that at the bottom of the screen, there's a question window in the control panel. So please submit your questions using that feature. We're going to save the bulk of the questions for the end, and depending on the number of questions asked, there only a select may be answered, but we'll do our best to get the remainder of the unasked questions answered following the event in writing. With regards to continuing education credits, certified floodplain managers are eligible for 1.5 CECs for participating in this webinar. Eligible participation means that you've registered individually and have indicated that you are a CFM at the time of registration, and that you viewed the entire webinar live as determined by the webinar software. Partial viewing does not earn credit. Additionally, if you're watching in a group setting or only viewing the recording, that is also not eligible for CECs. AICP certified floodplain manager CECs will be automatically applied if you are registered as a CFM. And if you're not, certificates of attendance will also be emailed to everybody who complete today's webinar. So you can go through a process using that certificate that you get to get your credits applied to your account if they don't automatically do so, using the email here on the screen, cfm@floods.org. Before I kick it over to Jaimie for the highlight, the feature of this webinar, I wanted to acknowledge that this webinar is part of a new webinar series and training program being hosted by AICP with the National Association of Wetland Managers and in partnership and funded by the Environmental Protection Agency. The Advancing the Integration of Clean Water Act programs with Natural Hazard Mitigation Planning and Implementation Training Project, long name, is designed to build cross-governmental relationships and awareness of what is going on in different departments, agencies, and at various levels of government in terms of hazard mitigation and water resource protection planning. Beginning this September, NOM and AICP will host one in-person training workshop a year for the next 5 years. Each year, a 2-day workshop will be delivered to a different regional cohort as defined on this map here on the screen. The first workshop is set for the sort of orangish red cohort on the map, and that's going to be this September. In addition to the 5 training workshops, there will be quarterly cohort calls with each of the participating communities and states. And this 10-part webinar series that's sort of supplemental, that's available to anybody. And all of the information created for this program is going to be hosted on a website that's launching this fall. So all the materials related to this integrated planning will be highlighted. The regional cohorts wanted to highlight real quick that are going to be focused around sort of representative pairs, 1 water resource and 1 emergency manager from each of 9 communities, 9 states, and 2 tribes from each region. And although not pictured on the map on the previous slide, U.S. territories are also included in this project and can nominate communities located in their territorial boundaries. And the state and territory pairs that will be part of the program are going to be from the same states in which local communities that are participating are located, again, to create those relationships across sectors, across various levels of government. Due to capacity, the training cohorts are invitation only. So if you're interested in receiving a potential invitation to one of the training workshops, please email Ian with NOM. His email address is at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so now I would like to introduce you to Jaimie Hicks Masterson. She is going to talk with us today about how to build resilience and adapt to future conditions through integrated planning, and more specifically, a process called the Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard, which is designed to help communities build resilience through plan integration for local decision-making. Jaimie is the director of Texas Target Communities at Texas A&M University, which is a high-impact service learning program that works alongside underserved communities to plan for resilience. Jaimie is the author of Planning for Community Resilience, a handbook for reducing vulnerabilities to disasters, which focuses on hazard mitigation strategies and tools for government officials, planners, and emergency managers that can be incorporated pre-disaster. She is the engagement coordinator for the Institute for Sustainable Communities and the Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard project, funded by the Department of Homeland Security, and a part of the Center for Coastal Resilience at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Masterson previously worked as a landscape designer and secondary education instructor, and she received her Bachelor's of Landscape Architecture and Master of Urban Planning with her certificate in environmental hazards from Texas A&M. Thank you for joining us today, Jaimie. I'm going to pass the screen share abilities on to you.
Hey, thank you, Jenna, and thank you to the sponsors and funders for the webinar today. Again, I'm Jaimie Hicks Masterson. I am at Texas A&M University. I'm a practitioner, though, as Jenna mentioned, and so that kind of means that I sit in this unique space of working with researchers that are thinking about sort of some of the cutting edge science, but really my focus is on working with communities and sort of fulfilling our land grant mission at Texas A&M to work with low capacity communities. So a lot of my day to day, since I am a planner, is working alongside those communities to assist them with incorporating disaster planning, resilience initiative strategies within their other planning initiatives. So this project has been a long time going now. Since 2014, we've been working with the Department of Homeland Security. And I have a wonderful team at different universities now who have been instrumental in this effort. So today I'm just going to go through really the overview of why integrating plans is important and kind of what that means, and just using our Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard to kind of illustrate that.
Jaimie, just sorry to interrupt real quick. People are saying it's a bit muffled, or a little low. So if you could.
Quiet. Okay. Yep. I will come a little closer to my.
Perfect. I think that's better.
Is that better? Okay. I'll speak up a little bit, and just please let me know if it's not good enough. Okay. Again, probably many of you on the call, I would imagine, are responsible for some type of planning, or you're within a community that has a number of different plans. What we've seen over the years is that communities are doing a lot of planning, and they're doing so much that they almost have a plethora of plans problem, and they lack coordination. So the emergency managers are doing their own planning, the city planners are doing their own planning, we have Parks and Rec, economic development, so on and so forth. Everyone's doing their own planning. But little is done to connect those dots, connect all those actions and strategies together. And especially as we think about mitigation planning, there's a lot of disconnection. So this all got started right after Hurricane Harvey. Phil Burke, the PI on the project, was looking at one of the communities significantly impacted there and sort of wondered, had they not been thinking about hazards, and did they know that they were going to be impacted? So he, of course, cracked open their hazard mitigation plan and found beautiful illustrated drawings and maps of their special flood hazard area and their 500-year floodplain. They delineated their repetitive loss structures and those having severe repetitive loss. And so they were certainly thinking about it. But then as a city planner, he opened the comprehensive plan and soon found that the comprehensive plan or master plan for the community was not talking about hazards at all, didn't seem to consider it at all in their own planning efforts. And instead, it was doing all of those things that planners love, like walkability, downtown revitalization, ways in which it could enhance its waterfront through economic development. And all those things are good on the surface, but there was obviously some disconnection and siloing of these different organizations and agencies, all within a relatively small community. So we worked as a team to develop a method, and essentially Jen is going to post in the chat a link to our website that we've developed called planintegration.com. But also on there, there's a whole host of resources and especially a guidebook. So essentially what we are doing, and when we say plan integration, it's not just looking at, oh, are you cross-referencing this other plan to this plan, right? It is a deeper dive and look at every single policy and action item within those plans. And then also, how are they spatially distributed? Are there certain parts of the community that might be, or certain neighborhoods or areas that have more conflicts? So that's what you're seeing right here, is first, we sort of delineate the different districts or the different neighborhoods within the community, and we look at the hazards, and we kind of come up with what we call a district hazard zone. Then we read plans and we score the plans, and we can, by scoring them, we can then map based on those scores, and we can come up with a nice visual of maybe what's going on. And then as a third sort of extra step, we can look at vulnerabilities, and we can see, you know, cross comparison of what are the scores doing, and then are those in the same spots where we might have more physical vulnerability or even more social vulnerability. So that's like conceptually the process and how we think about it in a spatial way. And another way to sort of think about it is if we have this particular community and all their different plans stacked up, and how are they sort of interacting in different parts of the community. So as you can imagine, at least the common theme that we've seen in all the different communities we've worked with, that where there is a economic development node, a downtown or some sort of central business district, there tend to be a lot more policies and a lot more conflicts. And so we see that sort of over and over again. So then getting into the weeds about what does that actually mean for communities. So we've done this, we've tested it across the globe, and we started the method really first looking at flood hazards because it was easy to map, because again, we want this to be a spatial analysis. But now we're able to pull it into wildfires and urban heat with different maps that we're utilizing. So that's exciting for us. So this is just a way to show that we've been building resources since we've been working on the project to develop the method, to pull together a rock star group, a national advisory board that really helped us develop the guidebook and test it and work very hand in hand with a number of different communities to develop different case studies. We tried to apply it with other sort of assessment tools that are out there. And then we're very excited, these last group of resources are all about getting it out there to folks, to practitioners with the Plan Integration Hub that we have. And also APA, American Planning Association, has developed a training where you can go and take I think it's a 4 or 5 module training on specifics of the tool as well as some other resources on our website. So when you open the guidebook, it's a pretty easy, we've tried to sort of break down the tasks fairly easily, but as you're thinking about how do I even begin this process, you can consider a couple of things. You want to have different agency department representatives as a part of your sort of core team that you're going to be working with. So as you think about the different plans in your community, who is responsible for those different plans and who has a hand in sort of implementing those and seeing those through. Those are the folks that you want involved and to have conversations with, and that you want them as well as across agency to evaluate these different plans. It's very helpful if you have someone who has mapping skills, GIS skills. It is not required. We certainly have done this with communities that have not had that capability, but it is really a great way to visualize what's going on in different parts of the community. So you might want to tap into those resources that you have. And then lastly, thinking about how you might engage and bring different types of stakeholders together to further the conversation, making sure that we come up with some holistic, comprehensive, new strategies and ways of thinking about resilience beyond just have it being in a hazard mitigation plan. So, and then the sort of Cadillac version is then to also assess your community vulnerability with looking at physical and social vulnerability. So again, this really is about not just cross-referencing, oh, we looked at this plan, they said this other plan said this, but it's really taking a deep dive and reading through the plans that are relevant, that are time sensitive, they aren't old essentially, and making sure that you understand every single policy. And when I say policy, these are action items, okay? A lot of hazard mitigation plans and other plans have more action items. So these policies or action items, what are they saying? And we can come up with a large list of what they're saying, and we can see how they might be impacting vulnerability. So this is kind of how we have broken down what we feel like is policy writing 101. How do you make a good policy? And as we were working with our communities, they said this was a unintended benefit of this process is, oh, we actually can create better policies through this. So how is it impacting vulnerability is sort of the first thing, and whether or not it might be reducing vulnerability or improving or increasing vulnerability. And you might not know on the surface. So sometimes we'll just pull all the policies regardless, right? But at the end of the day, you want to know how it's impacting vulnerability. The second piece to this is we want it to be place specific. Where is this going to impact? Is it impacting a park, a downtown district? Is it talking about repetitive loss structures? So anything that can be mapped, you want to see if there's some language in there about that. And then does it mention or sort of reference or allude to a policy tool? And when we say that, that's really any kind of form of government intervention to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So we have in the guidebook lots of different examples. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty there, but these are the key elements that we're looking for because they all play a role in making sure that the actual action is going to be implemented. It's not just fluff, and that we can also relate it to different parts of the community and how it might impact in different hazard zones. Okay, so enough with that for now, and I'm going to provide some case studies and examples to help illustrate some of that. But at the end of the day, what are we all doing? What are our jobs? Why does this matter? Well, I believe, and I think you're all here because we are interested in reducing our vulnerabilities, right? We are wanting to reduce our physical vulnerabilities and social vulnerabilities and reduce our exposure to different hazards. And the way in which we think we can do that is the way we are planning, the quality of the plans, and then the way in which the plans are talking to one another and interacting with one another. So are there ways in which we can pull in mitigation policies into our other plans and prioritize that in some of the most vulnerable districts? And within those plans, are there different policies like looking at regulations, zoning and building codes, like permit reviews, different market incentives, other target investments, all of these different policies that are usually embedded in those plans that can help us at the end of the day reduce our vulnerability. So this is sort of the big picture logic model of what we're getting at and why we feel like it's so important to evaluate plans. Okay, so I'm going to use this case study of Rockport, Texas as an example. This sleepy little town, it's on a peninsula in what's called the coastal bend of Texas. It was actually ground zero for Hurricane Harvey in 2017. That's the Hurricane Harvey that you probably heard on the news, later dumped 3 feet of water in Houston. Before it went to Houston, it hit Rockport. And this small little town of 10,000 folks was devastated. 25% of the structures were completely destroyed, and another 25% were considered significantly damaged. They lost about 20% of the population, and their community facilities were impacted. The city hall and the county courthouse was destroyed, and the schools were also impacted. They went through and looked at their network of plans. And I'm using them as an example. We looked at 5 different plans. When you pull your plans together, again, you want to think about which plans are going to be the most relevant. When we were looking and talking with another community, they wanted to pull 17 plans. And you can pull as many plans as you want, and the more the merrier in a lot of ways, but it's going to take you more time, as you can imagine. So start with the ones that are going to have the most impact on development and also the ways in which you can mitigate hazards, okay? And so we want it to be relevant. We want it to intersect with a hazard zone. So if your downtown is in a hazard zone, you can pull in your downtown plan into that assessment. And also, it needs to be spatial. Some of our emergency plans are not necessarily spatial, so this language is a little bit different for the emergency managers. You don't have to pull in your response plans, okay? We're just looking at the ones that are going to be impacting the physical built environment and community. So when you're going through the process, and you know, as I described before, what happens is you come up with this wonderful map, and you can see the different parts that might be doing better. The darker the green here, they have more policies that are reducing vulnerability. The lighter, or the whiter the color, the fewer policies that they have that are reducing vulnerability, or there might be conflicts going on. And so you look at this map and you think on the surface, okay, well, they're doing relatively well, right? But it's always the devil's in the details. And I want that to kind of be driven home for this particular presentation today, because the map is great, but at the end of the day, it's more than just about the maps, okay? So here, that previous map, this map was a composite of all of the policies of all 5 of those plans. These maps are those different plans that we were looking at and how they were scoring. So you can see here that some of the plans were scoring a lot better, and some of them had a lot of work to do. For instance, the map on the left is their Heritage District and Downtown Master Plan. Well, it has a sort of pink or red color, and it received, had more policies that were increasing vulnerabilities. So now we can see maybe how each of the plans are doing visually with these maps. But again, the maps are helpful because they can communicate a message, particularly to decision makers. But again, the devil is in the details. And so I'm going to show you here, we have what I believe are 5 key benefits to looking at your network of plans and integrating your plans. Okay, the first one, I have these little green boxes in the top right. First benefit is that it uncovers conflicts among different plans. Well, that's obvious, right? But that's the key benefit. Here, for Rockport's purposes, their master plan for their Heritage District was talking about developing waterfront property along Water Street. Well, you could imagine that Water Street is on the water and it floods. In fact, they get sunny day, high tide flooding because it backs up in their sewer. So, and they have some of the highest sea level rise projections for the Texas coast. So while this is a great economic development policy and we want to see this community thrive, this is what most coastal communities are looking for, I think we need to take another look at how we can tweak and change that policy to make sure that we are thinking about vulnerabilities in the process. The second policy I want to show you is from their county long-term recovery plan. So just a year after the hurricane, they developed this wonderful plan. In their plan, of course, it was all about bringing people back to the peninsula, coming back to this beautiful seaside community that's full of art and culture and fishing. And so their policy was all about making these sort of developer-ready zones and making sure that utilities and everything were in place so that developers could come and easily build. Again, this is a great policy, but there was no consideration or mention of hazards, and this is in their recovery plan. So just some things to be mindful of, these sort of unintended issues as we're looking at our plans. The hazard mitigation plan, the third one there, it was talking about updating the zoning regulations to reduce population density in vulnerable areas. that was actually really unique, and we don't often see zoning regulations talked about in a hazard mitigation plan. So that scored well. But on the other hand, that particular policy and language is not mentioned in the comprehensive plan where you would typically see zoning regulations. So what is it doing? Is it just fluff, or are they actually connecting to, and is that effort actually going to happen through the city and planning office? And then finally, they had a multi-jurisdictional floodplain management plan. It also said some great things, and they were focused on property buyouts and open space and flood mitigation measures. And all of that was great, but it also needed to be incorporated into other planning documents. Every single one of these policies was in the downtown, was in a hazard zone, and were saying quite different things, right? So as we have conversations with the emergency manager, the floodplain manager, the long-term recovery folks, the Heritage District Board Chair, the city planner, all of these different folks coming to the table and having conversations of what do we mean when we say this? And are we ready to take on the consequences if we were to do nothing? The second big benefit to looking at plan integration is it really fosters collaboration across agencies. So it is a way, if you need an excuse to call your fellow staffer or someone in another department, but you know that they are in charge of some sort of planning initiative, this is a great way to do it. Look, we need an unbiased approach to assess all of our different plans and see how they're talking to one another. So we really saw that across all the communities we worked with. And I'm pulling up this example of Nashua, New Hampshire, when we worked with them. They were very gung-ho. They had a very excited and forward-thinking emergency manager who led the way, and they looked at 14 different plans. We trained a core team of 9 different city staff and county staff who reviewed the different planning documents. And then we had separate meetings with a group of 40 what they called climate ambassadors. And so those were folks that were in charge of different social service groups. Maybe they were doing case management. Maybe they were ahead of the affordable housing and public housing initiatives. So they brought in many different types of folks that weren't necessarily always at the city department table, but they still needed to be involved because they were involved in some part of disaster response and recovery. So that I can talk more about how that initiative came about, and they also worked on a wonderful, I'm going to switch the page here. They used this app, this online digital tool called Co-Urbanize. So they not only trained their 9 city staff on how to do the scorecard, and then they engaged a broader group of 40 climate ambassadors. But then they actually took this out to the public, and they just really wanted to know what's great, what's missing, and what could be better in their community. And through those conversations, a lot of hazards were brought up, and they could see that, okay, this is an opportunity for us to add continued justification for the need to mitigate hazards in certain areas. Additionally, I just want to point to some of the win-win opportunities and efforts because of the fact that they went through this process. They realized that they needed the emergency manager in that office to be involved in permit review, and him to have a say and to look at the different new development coming to the community with a different set of eyes and have a say in that process. Through the process, they also amended many amendments in their hazard mitigation plan, and also they developed a resilience plan. And all of this came about because of that resilience planning effort. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but what you're looking at in these 3 different columns is, first, the emergency manager was very focused on updating their local hazard mitigation plan. It's got to get done every 5 years. So that's what he was really working within that framework. And so the list of tasks there are all from the handbook from FEMA, okay? He received a grant, though, in this middle column to do a resilience planning guide and a resilience plan, and they used the NIST Community Resilience Planning Guide. As he was looking at the criteria or tasks for that particular effort, what he realized was there was a lot of similarities with that mitigation planning guidance. And then the very far right column is our Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard guidebook. And we have a set of steps and processes within that. Well, that was also very similar to the tasks of the resilience guide from NIST and also FEMA's planning guide. So he saw an opportunity, why silo each of these planning initiatives and why not bring them all together and do this in a streamlined way so you can fit different initiatives and planning guidance and opportunities together. And if you'd like more on how to do that, I can certainly talk about that. Okay, the third big win for doing plan integration and looking at plan integration is identifies opportunities to create co-benefits. Okay, so you know, as an emergency manager, you're looking at those grants and you're trying to figure out how can I fit all of these needs and mitigate these hazards with just this small pool of funding. And on the other side of town or in the community, your Parks and Rec director are also looking at, wow, we have a really small budget to do some of these park improvement efforts. I don't know how we're actually going to get it done. I guess I'm going to have to apply for some other grants. Well, the benefit of coming together is you see where a lot of your initiatives are actually lining up together. So we worked with Norfolk, Virginia, and through that process, as with their efforts, you can see this map, it doesn't really matter what the colors are because they scored really well. And again, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily how well you score, but taking a deeper look at what's going on and uncovering the different policies in different parts of town and what that means. So they scored really well. Norfolk is very focused on resilience. They have, they're even looking at how their community is going to look and the impacts of sea level rise in 2100. They've been thinking about this for a while, but what they didn't realize was that they had fewer policies in more socially vulnerable neighborhoods overall, just overall, and they had fewer policies that were actually mitigating hazards in those more socially vulnerable neighborhoods. So that was new information to them. They hadn't ever, because this is an unbiased look, they had never looked at the policies and mitigation strategies in that way before. And at the same time, they knew that they also had fewer parks in these same socially vulnerable neighborhoods. So they applied for a HUD grant and received $112 million to build a resilience park, which will be about absorbing some of those impacts from their flood events, but while also providing more recreational opportunities for this neighborhood. And additional benefits, even though Norfolk has done so much, before doing this process, they had not had their emergency manager and city planners talking to one another and reviewing each other's plans. So you know that's going to be the case for every other type of agency and department and planning effort. So again, this is a way to kind of bring different folks to the table and to identify those big wins and big benefits. The fourth big advantage is that it fills gaps in the existing plans. So looking at Norfolk, Virginia, they made many amendments to the plans that they assessed. So again, the first big win was that they realized there was inequitable distribution of their mitigation policies. So first off the bat, they needed to make sure that they were providing more policies to mitigate in and across all neighborhoods in the community. The second thing is they decided after assessing their plans, they went back and they amended 27 different policies within their comprehensive plan. And what they did was they incorporated more of the hazard mitigation plan into their comprehensive plan. These were things like elevating and retrofitting existing structures, making sure that there were investments for stormwater infrastructure in the most vulnerable neighborhoods, things like that. Additionally, they had this Vision 2100 plan that I mentioned before because they've been looking at what their community would be like in 2100 because of sea level rise. And so they incorporated those policies into their comprehensive plan. Because really at the end of the day, the comprehensive plan is really pushing development and redevelopment in the community. So how and where people are matters, and how can we adjust the built environment and reduce our vulnerabilities in that process. So in that plan, they talked about some pretty progressive initiatives like gradual retreat, and they also talked about how they could revitalize and do more infill development in the higher elevated areas of the community. And then the last piece to this is they changed a lot of their land regulations and public infrastructure investment policies. So for instance, they changed the density requirements to make sure that there was lower density in the more hazard areas and allowing for higher density in the safer parts of the community. And then they hadn't ever really considered their policies on where they would site community facilities and infrastructure. Before they were allowing their own community facilities, their own taxpayer dollars in those hazard zones. And so they made sure that they had some stringent guidelines on where schools and roads and sewer and water could be within the community. Okay, and the last big win, and the reason why plan integration is helpful, is because it provides communities developing new plans. So you can do this as you're looking at your existing plans. Definitely, you can do it right now, do it today. But if you are thinking about doing a new plan, it also helps in this process. And it provides a framework to help you keeping hazards on the mind throughout your planning process. So we're going to come back to Rockport for a second. We worked with Rockport as they developed a new comprehensive plan. Their comprehensive plan was 20 years old, and so they knew that this was an important opportunity to think about what the community would want for the next 20 years, especially with Hurricane Harvey so fresh on the mind. So they were already doing a lot of rebuilding. Let's think about how we want to grow and develop in the next 20 years too. So we did a lot of community engagement. We had lots of different pop-up and public events, hearing from folks about different concerns, different opportunities that they would want to see, and many different, so many different comments came out that were focused on a range of different things, but also there was the need to think about resilience, think about how they were conserving and protecting the natural environment, how they wanted to incorporate stricter standards, fortified standards, building resilience standards into what they were doing. and being more responsible about that. So this is just a sort of a snapshot, I guess, of some of the different things that were discussed through that community engagement effort as they were going through and doing a new comprehensive plan. And so as they were thinking about the comprehensive plan, they also wanted it to be a high quality comprehensive plan. So I know that there's many different things that you can take on as a planner, as a manager, but there are lots of different types of tools that are out there, and there's actually lots of different types of plan quality tools that are out there. So there are hazard mitigation plan quality tools. I know there's also some environmental plan quality tools. There happens to also be a comprehensive planning plan quality tool. And this was developed by the American Planning Association. They have some resources out there on that. So as we were working with them to develop the new comprehensive plan, we wanted it to be high quality. So we went through and did our own assessment of the draft plan. We made improvements to that plan. And then we took that second draft and then we looked at the plan integration for Resilience Scorecard. And we saw how those policies within the draft comprehensive plan did with the other plans and network of plans in the community. And every time, the sort of iterative process, feedback loop of assessing, taking a critical look and evaluation of the meat of what exactly are we putting in our plans, and then how it relates to the other plans that have already been developed and written, and really pushing both the plan quality and the plan integration together. Through that process in developing the new comprehensive plan, if you were to take a look at it, you would see references to the other plans within that community. So there's now these icons within the comprehensive plan. This offers additional justification for why that policy is important, because, hey, it's mentioned in these 3 other plans too. And it also helps with turnover of elected officials. It continues to provide justification and some of that continuity. So if there is change, the winds change and there's different political climate, it's all still documented and codified right there. And you can say that, no, this does matter because we've been talking about this for many different, in many different plans over many different years. At the back of the planning document, that piece on the right is essentially the implementation table, which has all of the different action items and policies within the plan. And we also added a new plan integration column there to just, again, point out that this action doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from what we heard from the community engagement process, but it also comes from these other planning documents too. So just continuing to reinforce the importance of the policies and the importance of the work that you're putting forward, and justifying the need for continued investment for hazard mitigation. So the big outcomes for Rockport at the end of the day was the whole effort was really focused on resilience, and it was this policy framework to focus on resilience. Additionally, I said there was this new implementation action matrix that had plan integration incorporated into it. They incorporated 73 best practice policies across the network, which was really exciting. And there were 48 implementation actions that were referencing other plans within that comprehensive plan. And the effort also received a Silver Achievement Award for resilience. I'm going to provide one more example. Please don't shoot the messenger, but I want to just drive home one more point, and then we'll wrap up and I'll answer some questions. So final case study look. I know I mentioned the 5 benefits doing plan integration. But we recently, a recent doctoral student, she just graduated. She's now Dr. Malini Roy. She's at the University of Arizona. Her dissertation focused on work in Houston, Texas. So she evaluated their network of plans, again, looking at what was going on, what were the policies like in place before Harvey, and then how were the Hurricane Harvey recovery initiatives, how were those playing out across the community? So here is a map of Harris County, and Harris County essentially is where Houston is. Houston kind of engulfs almost the entire county there and beyond. But this is looking at social vulnerability. So she used the Center for Disease Control. They have specific metrics that they look at in terms of poverty levels, age, race and ethnicity, as well as, I believe, single parent households and folks with children under the age of 5. These are some of the indicators that they're looking at, okay? So the higher, or the more red the color there, the more socially vulnerable. Okay, so here you can kind of see a pattern across Houston of some of the more affluent communities, let's say, and some of the ones that are more socially vulnerable. So she looked at a neighborhood in West Houston, so that box on the left, and then she also looked at a more socially vulnerable neighborhood in Northeast Houston, and wanted to see how the policies were compared in these two specific neighborhoods, and what was the recovery like for those neighborhoods as well. This is just a mind-blowing map to me. What you see here are those two neighborhoods. So the one on the left is that more affluent neighborhood on the west side, and then the socially vulnerable neighborhood is that one on the northeast side. You're looking at the FEMA special flood hazard area in that darkest blue color, and then you can also see that 500-year floodplain as well. The light blue is the Hurricane Harvey flood extent. So that is how many people actually flooded and how much of those neighborhoods actually flooded in Hurricane Harvey. So pretty significant, far beyond the special flood hazard areas indicated by NFIP. And so very significant damages for those communities. These maps, again, the one on the left is that more affluent neighborhood. The one on the right is the one that's more socially vulnerable. What she found was that there were, of course, more policies that were exacerbating vulnerabilities in the socially vulnerable neighborhood. The affluent neighborhood had a lot more policies that were working to decrease some of those vulnerabilities. Additionally, she saw differences in recovery efforts and differences in, departmental and agency response to those different neighborhoods in the recovery efforts. So very interesting work and unfortunate work, but the way in which we are taking, again, an unbiased look at all of our plans and all of our policies and really holding up a mirror to ourselves and our community and our plans and seeing, okay, what really can we do to make sure we're mitigating hazards in the most vulnerable areas and really prioritizing and being more efficient with our the funds that we have at our communities. This is my last slide, and then we'll open it up for some questions. But just some things that I want to just put out there here at the end is that this, to me, is all, it's great to have all of that data. It's great to know all your different policies, but it does no good to just have them. It is the knowledge and the conversations that come from that data and that information. Additionally, this is a neighborhood scale approach. So we're looking at a smaller spatial scale, and it has to be spatial because we're seeing, because it's spatial, different patterns than we would have otherwise seen. So I think that's important to keep in mind, and it's important to take that smaller look and not just look citywide. I think it's important that you are looking and focusing on all of the policies within the plan. So it's really easy to just Control F, do the find function in Word or in your PDF and look for the word flood or look for the word mitigate or look for some key words. But what you'll find as you're going through this process, that there are policies in there that are unintentionally exacerbating vulnerabilities, and they have nothing to do with mitigating hazards. They have nothing to do with flood impacts. So those are some things that if you put on that hat of, is this going to impact vulnerability, it really widens the scope of what these policies are doing. We want this, and I think it is practical, but also worthwhile. So it's going to take you some time to read those plans and to have those conversations, but it is a worthwhile effort because you can be way more efficient with your initiatives in your city investments. It's important in this process, though, to leverage different champions in your departments and across different departments who can help you communicate this message and the value of working across those different departmental lines. And then lastly, I really believe in the power of small changes. And so I think this is an opportunity to nudge change, not shove it forward. People don't like that big change stuff. They don't like being shoved, but this is an opportunity we can make tweaks and small changes within the policies, within the plans, and they can add up and actually have a very significant difference in your work and in your community. So with that, I'm going to stop and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Jaimie. Really appreciate you joining us to share this process. I think it's a really valuable one to go through because of all the benefits and co-benefits that you mentioned. We have a couple questions in the chat related to assistance for doing the peers process and developing the plan. Do y'all have that ability right now, and or can you share sort of what the cost was to go through it with Norfolk or Nashua to do the exercise?
Yes. So yeah, our staff could potentially assist. We have a small group who are working on some different initiatives, but we could perhaps assist with different items if needed. So you can put my contact information in and we can talk more about specifically what you need. And sometimes you just need a little bit of coaching and you can kind of figure it out on your own with the training with the APA has and with the guidebook. But in terms of the time commitment, in our guidebook, we also have some time commitment of staff time that we think it's going to take. Generally, it's going to take 2 hours for you to read through the plans and pull the policies into your scorecard. But some of your plans, if it's hundreds of pages, that's going to take you far longer. So when we were working with Norfolk, Virginia, their plan was, I think, 217 policies worth. So the pages, I can't even remember how many pages, but there was tons of policies. And that took us about 12 hours for that plan to read through everything, pull it. There's additional time for the mapping piece, though, as well. And then additional time for having some of those conversations. But some of that's laid out in the guidebook, and I can, if you would like to email, I can provide some additional guidance if you need help setting up some of your FTE workload.
Thanks, Jaimie. Cassie asks, how many other cities along the Gulf Coast have done this kind of work in addition to the 3 communities you highlighted?
Along the Gulf Coast, I'd have to look back at our map. Is that cheating that I look at my own PowerPoint slides? But we, Yes, we've done Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, and also League City, Texas. Not as many in the mid Gulf Coast states, but this has been around for a couple years, and I keep hearing of different communities that have actually incorporated into, they applied for a grant to do a plan, maybe it's a hazard mitigation plan or a comprehensive plan, and they just folded this into the workload as a part of the process. So I keep kind of hearing that. So I'm not fully aware of all the different communities that have worked with this.
Thanks, Jaimie. Randy asks, is interagency collaboration fairly easy to achieve, or do you find individual agency regulations to prevent or restrict collaboration in any way?
The communities we worked with, it seemed fairly easy for them to work across those lines, and they saw with the hat of, okay, we're focusing on resilience, we're focusing on this as a community-wide effort. It really added that imperative to all the different agencies to participate. Now, it took, in Norfolk's case, it took a strong city manager and city planner that led the initiative there. Like I said, in Nashua, it was a strong emergency manager who really excited and ignited everyone to work together. So you kind of have to find that person that can kind of be the glue to pull folks together to see this forward. In Rockport, there wasn't as much of that, but because they had just gone through the hurricane, it was on the minds of everyone, and they were sort of, let's do everything we can to figure out how to address some of our issues.
Great, thanks. And then I had one question too. I know from some of the other conversations I've had with you, there's, I wondered if you could stress the sort of, even if you don't have GIS on staff, the benefits of just going through that sort of first half of the process, and sort of how you can just improve your policies from a baseline as well.
Yes, I'm a strong believer, again, I don't like small changes work, and also not getting overwhelmed. So if you just need to start by just pulling your policies and having them in a scorecard or in a spreadsheet in an organized way, just start there. And then as you're reading and looking at each of those policies and you're saying, you know what, that's talking about the downtown. And then you can have a specific, we're just going to look at what's going on in the downtown for right now. And then when we get more time, we'll look at the other neighborhoods later too. So if you can figure out a way, like I think that's an easy way to start if you don't want to jump fully into the full process and into doing the GIS right off the bat. And you can get a sense of what policies are in the downtown or whatever particular districts that you're interested in looking at.
Thanks. So we had a question from Kirk asking, has this plan been used across state lines? And I put a clarifying question in the chat to see if we could get clarity on if that means sort of regional plans or more multi-state plans, but haven't heard back yet, so we'll see.
Well, I not that I'm aware of, our team has not worked across, if you're saying like a city that is encompassed in 2 different states, we've not done that. We have begun to think about how we could perhaps include not just city and county or regional plans, but are some of the state plans relevant to this plan integration effort too? It depends on, I think, how specific some of those state plans are. But I think that would be a worthwhile effort if there was a community that needed to look across different states.
Thanks. Well, that was the last of the questions. Yes, regional in nature. Awesome. Thanks, Kirk. That was the last of the questions we have in the queue. Want to give everybody just 30 more seconds if anything's percolating. Oh, here we go. Richard asked, could you say a few words about your experience with the application of the method in Europe or Asia?
Well, I specifically did not work on those. That was our other team members there. But as you can imagine, especially in the Asian context, there were fewer plans that were sort of the bottom-up community engagement kind of planning efforts. They were much more top-down. And so in those contexts, it was easy for us to pull the policies and really get a sense of the stack of policies in different areas. They weren't doing anything that differently from what we are doing here. It seems sort of across the board, across globally, an issue integrating plans for different communities. So if you're looking for sort of comparison stakes, they weren't necessarily more integrated outside the US.
Yeah. Okay, well, Jaimie, thank you so much for joining us today. Really great information. A lot of thanks in the question and answer box as well from everybody who's on the call. So really appreciate everything that you shared, and hopefully we can start to implement it into our practices when planning and sort of integrating across different sectors. So thanks so much, and everybody have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to end it. I think that we'll all leave with that. So thanks, Jaimie. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.